Hey everyone, welcome back to Mercurial Musings. Today I'm going to be doing a review of 4 popular astrology apps. Now, apps are becoming a lot more popular, especially with astrology, because they're easy and accessible. They make it easy to check in with the latest astrological transits, what's happening with your natal chart, and they also provide a resource to understand more about your natal chart, what's going on there. There are a lot of astrology apps, so it's really difficult to narrow them down. But what I did is I took 4 very popular astrology apps, at least amongst people that I know or interact with on the internet. I'm going to go over them, kind of give their background, the research that I've done on them, and then I'm going to talk about some of the pros and cons to each of these apps. Now, the first app that I'm going to be talking about is called TimePassages. TimePassages is an app that was created by Astro, which is a company that's been around since 1995, when I was born. So already you know that the people who've made it have been around for a long time developing specifically astrology software. Let's start with the pros. Now, TimePassages is one of my favorite astrology apps. I like it because it's very insightful without being super confusing. What I mean by insightful is that they have a ton of free resources on there. Not only can you look at your natal chart, but you can also look at what's happening in the sky in the various transits that they're making to the chart. It's awesome because they have a lot of free stuff that you don't need to purchase. Of course, they do have in-app purchases if you want additional information, but as a free version, it's pretty legit and pretty thorough. In addition to that, I also really like how they make it accessible. They actually have a glossary of terms where they define certain things that you see in astrology, and I think that's really important because the whole point of technology in making astrology easier to understand, it's also making it more accessible. People don't know what terms you're talking about. They're not going to really understand or get the meaning that you need. TimePassages doesn't really have a lot of cons for me personally. I think really the only thing is that it can be a little confusing. The interface has a lot of information, so if you're not really familiar with astrology, there's a lot of terms coming your way that's a little confusing. But of course, that's something that's easily overcome, and they do have that glossary to define certain terms that you don't understand. So the second app that I'm going to be talking about is CoStar. Now, CoStar is very popular. It's most known for its very quippy, memeable push notifications that it sends to you if you have that feature enabled. Now, CoStar was created, I believe, in 2017 by 3 people who worked in the tech industry. CoStar is AI driven. They do input information about astrology, but it's pretty much generated by artificial intelligence. So let's start with pros. CoStar, I think, is most known for its aesthetic interface. It's pretty easy to use, it's straightforward, and it's very beautiful. The way that they lay out everything just looks very nice and very clean. It's also very easy to navigate. You can very clearly see that they're talking about your chart here, and you can also compare your chart to other friends, as well as look at the transits that are currently happening to your natal chart. Now, the cons. I personally am not the biggest fan of CoStar. I think that the horoscopes and the information about the transits are very generative. I mean, it makes sense, right? It's driven by an AI. So of course they don't always sound very authentic, I guess is the word. I also think because it is AI generated, the people who created it weren't actually astrologers. They gleaned a lot of their information from astrology textbooks. I'm not entirely sure if they consulted astrologers or had astrologers write for them, but that's one of my biggest issues with this app, is because it feels more trendy and kind of just like, here's something to make astrology accessible, but it's not very thorough. I don't really think it does astrology justice. Of course, how can an app do astrology justice? But I'm saying that there are different ways to do it, and this one doesn't ring so true for me. I think it's a little bit reductive, and it kind of simplifies astrology in a way that isn't really the best to help people learn and understand. It just seems more of like generic enough that it resonates with anyone. So the third app that I'm going to be talking about is the Pattern. Now the Pattern came out in 2017, but it's just now starting to gain some popularity. I've seen it on my Twitter feed, and it seems a lot more users are discovering more about this app. In my research, I couldn't really find that much information on who created it, so it's a little confusing. Their website doesn't offer much information about its origins, but it is an app that is pretty well known for its very thorough interpretations of transits. So let's start with the pros. What I like most about the Pattern is that they have really accurate, insightful descriptions. When you're on the app and checking, your day or your week, they have all these different blocks where you can see a brief interpretation of what it's about, and then if you click on it, you can actually go deeper into this kind of whatever it is that they're talking about. You also get to see what your friends are going through as well. This is something CoStar does as well, but a lot of astrology apps are becoming more and more like social networks in a way. So it's cool how the Pattern will talk about a pattern that you're going through, and they'll also say, oh, well, this other person is also experiencing this. So it's kind of fun to bond. So let's talk a little bit about the cons. One of the biggest problems I have with Pattern is the fact that they don't tell you which transits they're referring to. I think maybe this is because if you do include that information, it might be off-putting or confusing, especially for people who don't really understand astrology but want really the interpretations or the horoscope. However, I do think that this is problematic because there's no real way of fact-checking or even learning more from other sources because it doesn't list the transit. What does that do? Like, it doesn't do really much. The people are kind of dependent on astrology apps to tell them what's going on rather than taking the step to maybe interpret that for themselves. So the fourth app that I'm going to be talking about is Astro Guide, and this is Vice's specifically astrology app that they recently launched, I believe this year in 2019. This app is primarily what the horoscopes look like on the Vice website. It's just kind of packaged into a really nice aesthetic interface that's easier to use than accessing the website. So Astro Guide is pretty simple. It's straightforward. You enter your birth information and it gives you little horoscopes that are free. I like how this app will give you a little blurb of what to expect today, and they also do weekly and monthly horoscopes, which is really awesome if you want a heads up on what to expect. What I also like about this app, it has really beautiful illustrations specific to each of the signs, as they've had on the Vice website for a long time. Now, there are actual astrologers who write for this app, which is really awesome because it definitely feels like all of the horoscopes are insightful. They take into account what's happening in the stars and present it to people in a very honest and authentic way, as well as it not being super confusing. They do make it very accessible, even if you know nothing about astrology. So the basic free version of this app is pretty straightforward. You pretty much only have access to what's going on with you. If you want to add friends or family, in addition to doing comparing charts, those are available but for an additional cost. In regards to the cons for Astro Guide, I don't really have that much. It's more of just depending on what you're looking for. So if you really just want to focus on yourself, see what's happening with your sun sign, then this app is perfect. It's great for you. If you are someone who wants to know a little bit more about astrology, this app doesn't really go beyond maybe, I think they do sun signs and you have to pay if you want more in-depth analysis for your moon sign. Your rising sign, they do have like a little blurb about it, but I don't think that you're able to go deeper into that. So that was my take on some popular astrology apps that I have used in the past. Depending on what you use apps for, you're gonna have different thoughts and opinions on all of these. I'd love if you post in the comments what your thoughts are, or if you have any other app recommendations. I definitely want to check out more. The thing to keep in mind about astrology apps is that they're never gonna be the same experience as talking to an astrologer. I think they're really great to learn more about astrology, but again, they're limited, just like any other technology that seeks to kind of condense or present a very crystallized view of something that's very complex and difficult to grasp. So that is my take on some astrology apps. Now don't forget to subscribe if you want the latest updates in astrology news and also what's happening in the stars. There is going to be a full moon in Pisces on September 14th. I've written a blog post about that. I'm not going to do a video, but I will link the blog post in the description. They are horoscopes, so definitely check those out. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you stay Mercurius about all kinds of astrology subjects. See you next time.